My first apartment was a shithole, but it was a big shithole. As B and I visited the place for the first time, we noticed that the apartment had no insulation, a number of openings to the outside that would freely admit all sorts of insects, and a back door that wouldn't lock because, as evidenced by the warped way it sat in the doorframe, it had previously been busted down. We also noticed that it was big and quiet and had neighbors who kept to themselves and, most importantly, had a landlord who seemed impatient to get us moved in and was asking a very reasonable figure for the rent. We had our application in the next day, and a few days after that, I paid the deposit in the first month's rent, handing over the last of my savings in exchange for the keys. Entering our new apartment together for the first time, I couldn't stop smiling. "We're home," I said to B. "Finally, we're home." That first night, we sat cross-legged on the tile in the corner of the otherwise empty living room in front of a TV that, lacking any furniture to support it, was also sitting on the tile. We had a pasta dinner I had improvised from what little food I'd brought with me while watching a movie on compact disc, since it would still be some time before we could afford to get the internet set up. There were no lights in the living room. Darkness enveloped the barren walls. Snippets of dialogue and gunshots emanated from the TV. We only had one twin air mattress, so I piled up all the blankets I had brought with me into a cushion that was little relief from the rigidity of the tile. B insisted I take the air mattress, refusing to move from the blanket pile despite my pleas that we switch. That first night, it was not relief, but dread that overtook me as I was about to fall asleep for the first time in my first apartment. I regretted my earlier words. This place was not a home. No place so empty could be called a home. I had fallen in love with B while we were in high school. She was an introverted, introspective girl with big, understanding eyes. She was known for her melancholy demeanor, but when she was around me, she felt happy. For a while, being with her made me happy too. We'd spent a blissful senior year together, hopping the bus to explore the city, reading the books we both loved, indulging our shared passion for the movies, and talking about those things in the future we were most looking forward to. Then, graduation came. B's father was evicted from his apartment, and no longer obligated to provide for his daughter. B had nowhere to go. I thought that I was the only person who truly cared about B. A succession of acquaintances and distant relatives throughout the country put her up for a month or two at a time, but with just a high school diploma, no stable home, and no way to provide for herself, it felt as though the responsibility to restore some normalcy to B's life weighed entirely on me. I worked and I saved, sending B what I could afford to so that she could eat. Compounding the difficulty posed by the distance between us was B's depression, which had begun to encroach on every corner of her life. She turned to video games as a way of coping, and soon the gentle, empathic girl I had fallen for would spend our phone conversations complaining bitterly about teammates, opponents, and developers. She lost interest in all the things we cared about in high school. She was slowly losing her way from reality. This drove me to do more and more work for her, thinking that once we were living together, B would be freed of the depression that had eroded away her will to live, and maybe I would be able to be in love with her again. That first night in our new apartment, I realized that a home was much more than a place to sleep. For a place to be a home, it had to be full of warmth, happiness, comfort, laughter, memories. Our empty shithole had none of those things, so for the next 6 months, my new obsession was filling that shithole with all the things that B would need to be happy. Furniture came first. I raided thrift stores and garage sales for inexpensive furniture, pestered friends for any housewares they could spare. I became very familiar with the least expensive model of any given piece of furniture that IKEA had to offer. A day didn't pass without me bringing something special home for B, whether it was as small as a new mug or as large as a defective 8-shelf bookcase I had bought on clearance. This one was in addition to the 3 bookcases we already owned. I loved books, and B had once loved books, and we always envisioned our home as a place absolutely overflowing with them. A nearby library had monthly used book sales, so I would arrive home from work on the first Saturday of every month with a box stuffed with dozens of books. When there was no more space in the bookcases, I took to stacking each month's haul on top of them. When that became too unstable, I started stacking the books on the floor. While shopping, I'd longingly eye any mattresses I encountered, the prices on their tags, always just beyond my pathetic savings, mocking me. At first, B tried to match my excitement each time I'd bring home something for that one spot in the living room that still felt a little too empty. But my excitement turned to bitterness as it became apparent that the things I was buying were bringing us no closer to one another. As free space rapidly vanished from our apartment, so too did free time vanish from my life. I had 2 jobs and was going to school full-time. On a typical day, I woke up at 6, left the apartment by 7, and was in class or at work for the rest of the day before getting home around 10. B would spend the day playing video games or sleeping, rarely able to amass the energy needed to leave the apartment. Whenever I got home, I would make B dinner and spend an hour watching TV with her before getting a few hours of sleep. Stop getting my hair cut, stop going to the movies, stop doing my homework, stop reading for fun, stop talking to my best friend, and stop taking care of myself. I knew I couldn't keep living that way. But I kept biting back the bitterness so that it wouldn't become outright hatred for B. She needed me. After being dedicated to her for so many years, it would be wrong to leave her. I was only alive when I was taking care of B. Whenever B's depression worsened, I worked harder. I paid her rent, kept her fed, bought her everything I thought that she might have wanted, but one thing continued to haunt me every time I'd arrive home from work. The one thing we needed that we didn't have. We still didn't have a bed. One night, as I lay awake next to her, not yet asleep, I started sobbing into the fabric of the air mattress. I haven't even gotten us a bed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm a failure. She just laid on her pile of blankets, silent, waiting for me to stop. When I had saved enough to buy a decent mattress, I insisted B leave the apartment to pick it up with me, and she helped me strap it to the top of my car. Sitting in traffic on the way home, trying to make her smile, I played songs from what had been her favorite band, Rush, and sang along to them. Her face stayed set. Getting the heavy, slippery thing into our bedroom was a trial, but when it found its place in the corner, displacing the piles of abandoned coffee cups, forgotten takeout boxes, and undone laundry that had previously been there, I wanted to cry tears of exhausted joy. Maybe, I thought, maybe I'd finally gotten B everything she needed to have a home. Months inched by. The mattress had proved to be a little comfort. Bitter exhaustion had become my normal state. I began to accept the possibility that I would spend the rest of my life caring for someone who needed me, but who I did not love. So tired was I that I didn't notice B's depression lifting. Then, one night in January, I was sitting with B on that mattress that had once brought me so much hope, when I realized just how low to the ground it was. I moaned, "I never bought us a bed frame. I'm sorry, I am so..." And she interrupted me, right before the tears could arrive. "I don't think that we should be together anymore." The calm and understanding in her voice, a voice I had not heard since high school, surprising me. It would be better for the both of us if we just moved on. Either to soften the impact on me, or just to justify the decision to herself, she told me why. She said I had come to rely on things as a substitute for love. She said I had mistaken caring for someone with providing for someone. She said, instead of the warmth, happiness, comfort, laughter, and memories that I had once promised her, I had only given her more shit. I wanted to protest, and I couldn't. I knew that she was right about all of it. We talked late into the night, and I left the room and crawled over the mountain of shit in our living room to a couch, where I laid until morning, trying and failing to remember what life had been like without B to provide for. When I got home from work the next day, she was gone. It took another 2 months to move out of that apartment. The facsimile of a home that I'd built in the last 6 months now needed to be dismantled. That apartment had everything in it, but it no longer had B. For the first time, I understood that I had become a hoarder. During my brief tenure in that shithole, I'd managed to amass at least 2 of every conceivable piece of furniture, so much kitchenware that I could have eaten for months without washing a single dish, and almost 2,000 books. I took all this stuff back to my mom's, where I constructed a ceiling-high wall of boxes that dominated the room I had grown up in. Laying on my childhood bed, not the new tear-stained mattress residing in my mom's garage, staring at the suffocating volume of stuff I had collected in those 6 months, I knew that my life was full of shit. So I gave nearly everything away. Every time I took a box away from home and came home empty-handed, I felt as though a little part of me was returning to fill the space that shit had previously occupied. I could sleep again. I was losing weight. I was spending time with my friends. My grades improved. I chose only 100 books to keep, and they meant more to me for having read them than those 2,000 that had stayed trapped on the shelves in that apartment I couldn't stand to think about anymore. For the first time in 3 years, I was happy.
That was Brienne Hayes, first time at VAMP.